webinar. Glad you can join us this afternoon. I'm going to say this morning, but this afternoon. And we have many of you on this. Glad to see such a great turnout for today's Alluserv webinar. Alluserv is about innovating, educating, and helping you elevate your meal service experiences. Together with our meal delivery and meal assembly equipment, with your food, your staff, we can all do it and make hospital food today a positive image. So welcome. Today's webinar is Nourishing Your Food Service Operations, and we are so honored to have Chef Michael Rodney with us. He is the President and Principal Consultant for Gastronomic Services and Consulting. Chef Rodney brings to the table over 20 years of hospitality food service industry experience, reinforcing his time and commitment to the industry. He holds numerous credentials from various professional organizations. Chef Rodney holds associate's degrees in both culinary arts and linguistics, a bachelor's degree in business management, and a master's degree in higher education and organizational development. He has recently dedicated himself to the launch of his own company where he's active as a lecturer and presenter of topics across organizations. He serves as a trainer, educator, mentor, collaborator, and consultant within various aspects of industry and education. Thank you, and Michael, and we are welcome to have you. My name is Marcia Diamond, and I am New Business Development with Alluserv, and we are thrilled to have you joining us here with Michael and our healthcare organizations today. So without further ado, let's get started. Nourishing your food service operations. Today you will walk away with several aha moments. The objectives of today's webinar is to give you 5 tips to edible, enjoyable food. 5 tips to edible, enjoyable food. We will identify the satisfiers of food preparation and plate presentation. We will give you some pointers on food collaboration teams that makes the difference in your organization. And we will discuss, give you ideas, and be able to give you some strategies for re-imaging the stigma of healthcare food so we can elevate the experience all together.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Marcia, for that lead-in. I'm happy to be out here presenting today. Thank you all for joining us, as Marcia said. So the 5 tips to the edible, enjoyable food that we're going to initially discuss, it's really going to be broken down into plate components, which is also the approach to the plate in our following slides. Then we have the craftsmanship that we'll talk about. How are we able to lend our professionalism and knowledge of food into the other topics that we're going to be talking about. The flavor development, what are some good, sound, foundational approaches that we can take to bring a more flavorful product to the plate, ultimately to your customer. Then Marcia will get into some service temperatures as well as the culinary mindfulness of all of our actions within the kitchen and our food service operation. Everything that we do, is whenever we're mindful of that, it's going to lend back better to the whole team as well as back to your customers. So number 1, the approach to the plate or the plate components. The way I like to teach on this is the 3 threes, so to say. So we have 3 colors on the plate, 3 textures on the plate, and 3 shapes to the plate, which as I go through these on their own individual slides, a lot of what's going to be spoke about and referenced really goes back into the second topic of craftsmanship. So we'll talk through that. So as we look at this picture here, you can see the 3 colors that we have. We have a green, we have an orange, and then we have our brown shades or our more neutral shades. But even within that, on the potato and on the airline chicken breast, we still have different depths of that brown color. The textures on the plate, we have the puree, which is going to be very soft. Then we have the spinach. It's going to lend the cream spinach. It's going to have a little bit more chew to it. Then the potatoes, probably some crispiness on the outside with that texture as well as a more soft interior. And then the shapes, you can see that we have the puree, which really to an extent is a shape. Then we have the chateau potato or the tournée potato, the airline chicken breast, as well as the leaves of spinach. So that really is going to help to sum up the approaches on our following slides, talking about the colors, textures, and shapes.
Michael, you said something about airline. Could you define the airline? And once again, I just wanted a little housekeeping tip. If you have any questions, type them in, and we will get to them during the program as well.
Yes, thank you for the question, Marcia. And yes, please do. If you have questions along the way, as Marcia said, I really like to try to touch on those questions as we're within the slide and within that topic area and the subject matter. It really helps to bring clarity to the discussion. And if you have a question, it's very likely that the other attendees out there, at least one or two of them, are going to have a similar question. So back to the airline breast. Airline chicken breast is a semi-boneless breast, which is the breast without any ribs. So it's a straight breast meat, and then we have the drumette attached to it. And typically that drumette is going to be Frenched. Frenched meaning the protein taken off and the bone exposed. And then airline breast is typically going to have the skin on it, as our previous slide did have the skin. So and you can see it here, the airline breast, boneless breast, skin on top, the drumette with it Frenched, so the bone is exposed, and then we have actually cut that knuckle off the end of the airline breast, and this really lends back into craftsmanship. So when we actually cut that knuckle off the end, it allows the juices to escape through the marrow and come out the end, instead of pooling down into the fat of not the fat, but into the thicker part of the breast where the drumette is attached or where the wing bone is attached. And a lot of times that's our thickest part. It's going to obviously be the toughest part to get fully cooked properly. And what we don't want to happen in that being the toughest part to get cooked properly, we don't want the juices and any blood that may still be contained in there to go down and pool in that thickest part. Once your customer cuts into that, they're going to then have a perception of it not being properly done if there's still some pink in there, even though you may have properly temped it out at 165 degrees. So that's our airline breast. So the three colors to the plate, just a couple of examples here. As you can see in the pictures, some colorful plate presentation going on. But really the question here is, how can you integrate color into the plate? Obviously, we have natural color that's contained in our product. So on the top right picture, we can see we have the beautiful tournée carrots that had that nice, bright, vibrant orange color, the chiffonata Brussels sprouts behind them, so we have that green. So whenever we have a good, natural, inherent color within a product, now we take the next step to say, how do we want to retain the color? So when we have the orange in the carrots, and we want to have that bright, vibrant orange carrot, blanching and shocking, so blanching in hot water could either be accomplished through hot water or through an actual steamer, and then shocking the product. Same thing with the majority of all of your green vegetables, depending upon the preparation, whether it be the Brussels sprouts as we're referencing here, or broccoli, green beans, spinach, anything that has chlorophyll contained. If we blanch and shock it, so blanching however you approach that through steam or boiling water, and then shock it in ice water, is going to help lock that chlorophyll in there. So even if you're doing a crudité, which is just your vegetable platter, and you're putting broccoli on it, if you blanch it, it's going to help blossom that color and soften the mouthfeel, but also give that nice bright, vibrant green color to it. So colors, so we have our inherent natural colors that we're dealing with, but then we can also take another step of that if we didn't want to have that bright, vibrant orange carrot, what are some other ways that we could approach that? We could do a caramelized carrot that's going to help to change that color, not be so bright and orange. It's going to give more of a caramely appearance to it. You could roast the carrots, which is going to bring in a different flavor profile as well as a different appearance. So depending how you're going to compose your plates, this is one of the first things that you can think about. And then what are the benefits of the approach to the colors on the plate? some different benefits from my perspective. If we have different colors, that means we have variety contained within the plate. It's also, as we all know, you eat first with your eyes. So whenever you get something and placed in front of you, and it has some pops of color and freshness, as opposed to just monochrome earth tones that are sort of cooked out or leached out of the product due to improper cooking, it's going to be a better first impression that you're putting across your line and then ultimately putting in front of your customers. So whenever we look at the various colors to the plate, first of all, the eye-appealing nature of it, it's going to be more interesting as well. Ultimately, whenever we're keeping those colors, bright, vibrant orange carrots, broccoli and green beans, or broccolini, broccoli rabe, those types of things that are going to have that enhanced green color to them, it's going to be more nutritional. It's going to have a better nutritional profile that you're bringing to your customers as well. If you cook the life out of that broccoli, first of all, it's not going to have the nice, bright, vibrant green color. It's going to have more of a, and we've all seen it, in a hotel pan sitting in your steam wheel sometimes, unfortunately. It's a brownish green, so it's very washed out. It's not vibrant. It's not full of life, and it's not real attractive to look at. It's just sort of, a brownish, greenish looking broccoli. So the better care and attention that you can take in approaching the components to your plate, it's going to serve better for you. Another way that we can bring different color to the plate is, as I mentioned, the approach to the cooking method. So we have our searing, frying. Grilling is going to give you color contrast on the plate. If you put char grill marks onto something, a chicken breast, for example, if you poach a chicken breast or broil a chicken breast, the color is going to be different from that of if you've actually put grill marks to it. So the approach to the cooking methodology is going to be very important. If you bread something and fry it, or if you bread something and sear it in a pan, or just lightly dredge it in flour and sear it in a pan, you're going to get different colors. So knowing the product and knowing the inherent nature of what you're doing to it as a result of the cooking methodology is going to serve you dividends. So as we're putting plates together, designing your cycle menus or designing your weekly menu or your holiday menu, think about the things that you're actually putting onto the plate. I've done it myself. There's been times where I've composed a plate in my head on paper, and once you execute that plate, you go, oh, all right, that didn't really turn out the way that I had envisioned it originally. So knowing your products and knowing how you can manipulate the cooking methods that you're putting onto the plate will ultimately help to bring you better variety, better eye appeal, and ultimately a more healthy plate that we're putting in front of our customers. And incidentally, the bottom picture, sorry, Marcia, the bottom picture, that's a beurre sauce, so a white wine butter sauce that has chopped dill in it. So the dill, if the dill was not in that butter sauce, it would just sort of, it wouldn't have texture and contrast on the plate. It would just be sort of a yellow sauce. So the dill chopped in there, as easy as that is, helps to give contrast and color to the plate. And then we have the fish elevated on there on a crouton on top of the braised, I believe it was Swiss chard. So different colors, textures that we're going to get into next. So go ahead, Marcia.
And the other thing I was going to say, when we say 3 colors on the plate, the other component of it is that the plate could be one of the colors. And so therefore it could integrate color into your plate. If you had a colored plate, and there is some color psychology about talking about colors. So if you had a yellow plate or an orange plate, which stimulates taste, and complemented it with it, and that's the other thing, is realize whatever plateware you're using or what covers you're using has to correlate. So if the plate itself is a color, you want it to complement so that it is stimulating the eyes, and the color psychology is stimulating your patients or your residents to eat more, to drink more, etc. So the benefit to color is stimulation, hydration, and of those residents and patients.
Definitely, super, super. Thank you. So moving on into our next subject or our next topic within the plate presentation is our textures to the plate. So what are the textures? Think about yourself. What is the texture whenever you sit down to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, your snack, or what have you? First of all, we eat with our eyes. Then secondly, when you take a bite of something, that's the texture, whether it be soft, crispy, chewy, crunchy, al dente, as we talk to and refer to pasta or to vegetables. And I know that we all need to cook to our clientele. And if your clientele likes vegetables that are more done, I say that we need to take it upon ourselves as a level of education to slowly introduce these things, textural components to your guests, and let them know that when something looks more vibrant and has a little bit of tooth to it, as we call with al dente, to the tooth, it's going to be more nutritional as well as more substantial. So our textures, the textures as I mentioned here with the crispy, soft, chewy, so on and so forth, emphasizing the natural textures of something. So on the top left we have a salad. So emphasizing those crisp characteristics of your greens. Let's just use greens for example. How many times have you gotten a salad where the lettuce wasn't crispy? That really right away should let you know how that salad was being approached to an extent, or how it was being handled. The best practice for processing salad greens would be to process it either the night before or early in the day, so that the lettuce, as opposed to right before service, so that those greens have a chance to what we call refresh. So after they've been washed, they can go back into the 35-degree, 40-degree cooler and be able to actually become crisp. As they sit in there, and I'm sure you all have experienced it and done it for yourselves at home. So whenever they go into the cooler, sit overnight, they're going to be more crispy. So it has a better mouthfeel. It gets a chance to sort of rehydrate and really become more eye-appealing, as well as more palatable and more enjoyable within that salad. We also have apples on that plate. How you treat the apples. Obviously, we don't want to, I'm sort of getting out, I'll jump around a little bit. Textures, handling the apple properly so it doesn't oxidize. Apples oxidize, avocados oxidize, bananas oxidize. Anything that turns brown, exposure to air is oxidation. So treating them properly with what we call acidulated water or acid water, which would be citrus, lemon, lime, orange juices of sorts in water, or you can even use salt, which for the majority out there, the ideal approach would be more of the juice approach as opposed to salting the water. So acidulated water is going to help to maintain the visual appeal of that, but also soaking is going to give it a more crispy component. So also with textures, we have our natural textures that we can emphasize, but also back to what I mentioned about within our colors to the plate, the cooking methodology can help to develop the texture. If you cook a chicken breast on a grill or cook a chicken breast after it's been breaded in a shallow fryer and a saute, you're going to get different textures of the same product. Putting flour onto chicken and searing in a pan, as I mentioned earlier, is going to give you a different textural outcome than just putting a non-treated chicken breast into a pan and executing it that way. So those are different ways we can create texture. On the bottom right, we have a pork loin that has a little breading to the outside that is obviously going to give you some more texture. So we have the meatiness of the pork loin on the interior, and then we have the outside brown, golden brown from the breading that's been put on the outside. It's going to give you a crunch as well as a tooth feel, along with the green beans that the appearance tells me they probably were properly treated, so blanched and shocked in some fashion, because they have that nice, bright, vibrant chlorophyll green color to them. And then another textural component that leads me into discussion about potatoes would be, let's just call it, from not knowing, a sweet potato puree. It could be a butternut squash or acorn squash or something of that sort. But potatoes, so many different ways you can bring texture to the plate just simply through a potato. We showed the tournée potatoes on our first slide that were all nice and golden brown on the outside. So with a potato, whether it be a sweet potato or a russet baking potato, you can make French fries from it. You can puree it. You can make a whipped potato out of it. You can make a hash brown out of it. You can make a home fry out of it. So simply right there, 4 different textural components that you're bringing to the table, because we all know how they differ. The French fry is going to be more crispy on the outside, as well as fried, so that's definitely something you need to consider in. All the way to the puree that's going to be obviously very soft. And then within the middle, we have a home fry that's going to have that texture on the outside, but more soft in the middle. And then all the way into a hash brown that's very more crispy on the outside, with little softness in the middle, but we have that textural component of that shredded potato going on as well. And then with another texture on the plate, you can see on the pork here, we have that, let's just call it an orange marmalade sauce of sorts. You're going to have that soft, velvety feel with a little bit of maybe some orange rind, some orange peel in there as well. So the textures, inherent nature of the product, making sure you're maintaining that, but also using the craftsmanship that we're going to get into shortly to apply different cooking methodologies or finishes or treatments to a product to be able to change, not change the nature of the product, but to change the way that that product is hitting the plate in order to help to bring a wonderful, cohesive plate assembly together, not only for you to be proud of and for your employees to be happy to represent, but ultimately for your customer. Because if it's not for the customers, we don't have a job, as we all know. So ultimately, we're all about trying to make them happy and increase the quality of life for the people under your care, and making sure that they're happy and very well taken care of to the best of our abilities. Anything on this one, Marcia?
No, the thing I would say is just remember, think about when you're in your kitchen and you're looking at whether it's your retail components, whether it's in your dining, or whether it's in your catering, in your operations, take a look. Are you doing 3 textures? Look at the plates. Or right now, shut your eyes and imagine when you were at lunch today, were there 3 textures on those plates? Were there 3 colors? If they're not, there's small ways to implement it. The colors can also be simply with maybe even a raspberry vinaigrette sprinkling on, using colors, dressing, different components. So if you constantly think about the term 3, it will help you with that visual effect. 3 colors, 3 textures, those kind of components.
Great. Thank you. And then that leads us into our third 3, which is our shapes on the plate. So as we can see from the top picture, the shapes, we have the utilizing our natural shape of the carrot to create a somewhat of a rondelle. It's a diagonal or cut on the bias so that we actually have sides of it exposed. But we're keeping the round nature of that carrot and applying a cut to it on a diagonal fashion to be able to have a little bit more plate cover. Ultimately, it's less pieces that you put onto the plate for the same amount of portion. And then we have that wonderful little salsa that has the nice diced pieces in there, as well as the chopped cilantro, it appears. And then we have the chicken breast. Again, keeping the natural shape and nature of the chicken breast and applying a good solid cooking technique to it. It looks to be that it was probably grilled. So a nice healthy plate that's being put forward that has our textures, shapes, and colors. So we have the orange carrot, the variety of colors within the salsa, and then the white nature of the chicken breast on a clear plate. So obviously whatever that clear plate is being placed on is going to give contrast underneath. So it's on a nice dark surface that helps everything on that plate to pop. If it were on a white plate, you're probably not going to get that much pop. So that goes back to what Marcia mentioned earlier about making sure that you know the service vessel that you're going to be using so that you're able to properly compose the plate that you're going to be putting forward. Then we have our the natural shapes that I mentioned, creating an eye-appealing presentation. So anytime that you're able to ultimately encompass the colors, the shapes, and the textures to the plate, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are creating a more eye-appealing presentation. And then on the bottom right, we have more of a chopped salad that has tomatoes, various colored tomatoes in there, different cherry and teardrop tomatoes, and dried berries of sorts, along with our lettuce. So again, making sure that you're treating these properly. If it is, let's just say it's a dried cranberry in the middle or a craisin, that knowing what the texture of them are. If you get them in fresh, they're going to be more palatable. If they've been around for a little while, we all know what happens to them, as well as raisins. They start to dry up. So if they are getting more chewy, you can simply treat them, simmer them, soak them in warm water, or simmer them in orange juice to help to improve the palatability of that product for your customers. So again, thinking about ultimately how everything's going to be, first of all, seen by your customers, as well as be able to be enjoyed by your customer. So thinking about all those things whenever you're putting the plate design together and ultimately passing that plate through the window, or I should say the design through the preparation process and then ultimately passing it through the window, thinking about how all the different steps in that plate composition affect the final product going out the door. Marsha?
Oh, all good.
Okay, beautiful. So the next subject area is our craftsmanship. So the craftsmanship, really everything that I spoke about whenever we're coming through the colors, the shapes, and the textures, all relates right back to craftsmanship. The better that we're able to understand how to encompass those 3 threes, without saying each one each time, the better we can approach bringing texture and enhancing the color of a natural product, and manipulating the texture of something on a plate. All links right back into craftsmanship. It's product knowledge and it's execution of our craft as a chef or as a food service professional. So mise en place, obviously, a lot of people will say, and I kept a slide out of here, mise en place really is a way of life in the kitchen. Everything that we do, everything needs to be in its place. That's the sign of a properly run kitchen. Whenever you know where everything's at, whenever you know you have all the product you need to execute tomorrow's menu, when you're using your mise en place, and I like to look at mise en place as not just to execute this recipe right now, right here, but it starts weeks ago through the ordering process. So ordering and developing the order sheets for your cycle menus and knowing that the product that is coming in, that you have the product that you need in order to execute a particular dish. But then it moves into the production phase of whenever the product is being started to be prepared and looking at the mise en place, knowing that you have the yogurt to make that particular sauce. Because if we don't have the yogurt, that recipe is going to either need to be changed or omitted or totally integrate an acceptable substitution in there, which sometimes is tough because we're adhering to nutritional guidelines within the recipes that we put together. So the recipe may need to be manipulated, changed, or totally omitted because we don't have the proper ingredient in order to execute said recipe. So thinking about that, and the better as a manager, so speaking to different people sort of in this conversation, from a management perspective, the better that we do our job as managers to set our line staff up for success, the better life is for all of us, the better we all look. So making sure that you have everything in-house that you need in order to execute recipes. But the same thing, and if an employee is starting to work on a recipe, they need to make sure that they're communicating back to the proper authority if they don't have an ingredient that they need, or they can't find an ingredient that they need. I don't know how many times I've been told that, Chef, we don't have X, let's just use yogurt. We don't have any more yogurt. And you go and either the yogurt's in there, it's behind the sour cream and they couldn't see it, and probably some of you are chuckling right now because we know this happens quite often, or the order might be on its way, excuse me, and they just need to reprioritize how they're going to execute the day's prep list. So some different things there. So mise en place is so important. And mise en place, taking it to the next step, is knowing that you have all the ingredients, but then also the proper quantity of ingredients that you need. So everyone's going to execute their mise en place in a different fashion and a different level of refinement. But teaching that as sort of a way of life in the kitchen really will help to pay its dividends. And then the craftsmanship of sound cooking techniques. If the recipe asks that you pan fry something, are you actually pan frying? And pan fry by definition is moderate heat with the oil halfway up the side of the product. Or are you actually deep frying that because you have too much oil in the pan? Or if you're supposed to be sauteing something, are you pan frying? Sauteing is a little amount of oil with a little higher heat so that the product is getting done more quickly. And just being coated with oil, and incidentally, once that product is coated with oil, that oil is really the vehicle for driving the heat into said product. So think about it. If you've ever put something into a pan, let's just use a eggplant parmesan or something that's breaded, something of that sort. If there is a dry spot in the pan, when you flip it, you'll be able to see that that spot probably didn't cook very well. That spot likely didn't get golden brown, might not have had any color going to it, or it could have burned. So it really depends, but that oil is really the heat transfer method for getting the heat through the oil to the product. Then when we look at the craftsmanship, going back through the 3 threes and talking about the built-in plate garnish, so many times people ask me, well, what can I do for garnishing plates in healthcare? What can I do for garnishing my plates in a hospital? I go right back to the craftsmanship and the sort of culinary 101 of 3 colors, 3 shapes, 3 consistencies. If you're bringing those, executing those properly, the plate has a built-in plate garnish. So you have beautiful colors, you have different shapes, and you have different textures that really play right into a plate garnish. And then it simply comes down to how are you going to assemble the plate in order to maximize and bring out ultimately all that wonderful craftsmanship that you have put forward. Mise en place, sorry, I guess I forgot to flip my slides. I was just paying all attention to everything else. So mise en place, why we do it, I went through all that. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, should I go to the next slide?
No, I was just going to talk right through it real quick, make sure I hit everything. As I mentioned here, all the different, okay. So dry sound cooking techniques, executing what you say you're going to be executing. If you're using dry heat cooking methods or moist heat cooking methods or a combination or sequential cooking method, making sure that you're executing them properly and following them through. And finally, as I said, we have our built-in plate garnish with everything there. So we have our 3 threes, proper cooking techniques, proper degrees of doneness, and then a thought-out plate assembly. Leads us into the flavor development. So very important. So many times, what I like to say is when you first taste something, does it taste good only when you first taste it and then it sort of becomes washed out? If it does, we haven't really developed flavor. We've really finished with flavor. So salt is a way, obviously, of enhancing flavor, and I know within our side of the industry, within healthcare and that side of the industry, we have constraints with salt. So we're able to bring in flavor. One offset for salt is heat or acidity. That's a different way to help enhance the inherent nature of the food. But then we also have some regional flavors. So bringing in other toasted herbs, roasted herbs, fresh herbs, seasonings, and so forth, and how we're going to bring forward flavor and develop it within your dish. And the creativity of doing that as well. So when we're looking at ultimately bringing flavor throughout the entire dish. So when you bite into something, let's just say this stew here at the bottom, when you first taste it, we want it to not only taste good when you first eat it, but also throughout. So you actually have good flavor that lingers in your mouth. So layering seasons throughout the cooking procedure. And what I have here is sequential pictures that lead up to this stew. So we've started with our onions. So when we, first of all, let me say, when you mise en place, it's going to call for a certain amount of seasoning. And think about using those seasonings throughout the different steps of the cooking process. So when we saute the onions, think about adding some of your pepper or your dried herbs in at that time. Helps to start to blossom the flavor, and the onions are going to absorb the flavor. Then we add our ground turkey. You add the ground turkey into the pan and cook that. Add some of your seasonings at that time as well. That seasoning then gets a chance to absorb into the product and flavor all that meat that you're cooking. Then we have cooked meat. We're getting ready to add our cabbage into the stew. Incidentally, this is like a Pennsylvania Pennsylvania, or a deconstructed cabbage roll stew is sort of what it is. So we have the getting ready to add the cabbage, and when you add the cabbage, add some more seasoning to that whenever you're sauteing it. So if you have some salt that's supposed to go in there, get some salt and pepper, some of your dried herbs, again, as I said, some of the heat components that you're going to put in there. Then ultimately, when you add all your tomatoes and your other sauce and everything into it, then you can add more seasoning, but also look at the end to adjust your seasoning. So if you go through onions without adding any seasonings, if you cook onions, turkey, cabbage, and then add in all your tomato products, and then add your seasoning into there, you're not going to get that depth of flavor, no complexity of flavor. Very, very important. So think about the next time you cook something, or when you've executed something recently, did you just add all the seasonings at the end? And it may, like I said, think about how it tastes throughout the eating process. Does it taste good only in the beginning, or does it actually taste good throughout the dining process? Very, very important. If you're only surface seasoning, that's what I call it. If you're just adding seasoning at the end to make it taste good, you're going to lose that depth and dimension of flavor. Very, very important in the cooking process. So then we lead into service temperatures that Marcia's going to pick off on for us.
Chef Mike mentioned something which is really good. He mentions about the colors, the textures, the shapes, and the seasonings. And the layering of seasonings is a component of, you actually can get your patients, your residents to eat better if they're not just the first bite, if it's the first bite and the next bite and the bite after that. So again, that layering of seasoning is allow that. Remember the last time you went out to a restaurant and you tasted something and then you tasted the next thing. It's that layering of seasonings that a chef or a cook who's been trained will be able to incorporate that. It's like tasting a piece of chocolate that has really been, a lemon chocolate, a basil. When you first taste it, you get one flavoring. Then you taste again, and it's the texturing. So remember that. In your cooking can be incorporated these kind of concepts very simply. And these slides will be available on the Alluserv website so that you can go back and look at these different techniques. But one of the other components, the tips to enjoyable food is proper temperature. You have to make sure your salads or your foods that are supposed to be cold are cold and retain their cold. The foods that are hot retain their hot, and the product integrity. And how do you do that? You do that through equipment. You do that through either display cases, refrigerated display cases, hot, drop-ins, cold drop-ins, and countertops. You do that through air curtains that can help you maintain the temperatures on your meal assembly lines. You do that through multi-temperature carts that can help you sustain your temperatures in your cold food and your hot food so that the patients that are getting it last have the same sensation as the patients that are getting it first. Use cold drawers. Use equipment to allow you to maintain those temperatures. Again, proper refrigeration, proper receiving, but proper meal assembly enables you to do that. The other thing is, the other component, the fifth tip, is culinary mindfulness and basic culinary techniques that can elevate your food service operations. What I mean by that is there's a term called mindful cooking. And what it does is you need to have the ability that your chefs a lot of times are just cooking and going through the process of cooking for the meal. The idea is if the chefs are more mindful, realizing the sensation of the oil, the sensation of the sound, it makes the finished product. If you speak to a chef who really loves and is passionate about his work, and you may have that in your operation, you will realize that he observes, he hears the oil sizzle, he'll add the seasoning. Something like Chef Mike, who's really, I'll go Chef Mike Rodney, who's really about observing when he's cooking, chopping, the textures, because he's being mindful. He's not just gathering or putting things together. So the idea of being mindfulness in the type of ingredients you pick, realizing the slicing, what it looks like, that's the idea of being mindful in the moment, pouring the oil in the pan, listening to the sound. That's really the ability to really make a product really complete. And we talk about mindful eating, and that allows your patients and your customers to really enjoy that full sensation if you are cooking that way. There's lots more resources out there if you Google mindfulness in cooking and culinary, but we just wanted to touch upon that as the fifth component to enjoyable food. You can imagine the possibilities. You see the joke here, he's not just a patient here. He just comes in to eat. With his coverage, it's cheaper than a restaurant. It's kind of like we want people to start thinking about the image of food service that way. The other component of, and Chef Rodney will come back into that, is we're going to talk about the food preparation and plate presentation, our major crucial plate satisfiers. The chef has just spoken about the idea of the layering, how it's plated, the colors. If you look here, which appeals to you more, the one on the left or the one on the right? The idea of color, textures, makes a difference, even in a breakfast item like that. So today it's about changing the image, re-imaging food. It's not very expensive to do it. It's just basically putting the time to start when you're developing your menu, when you're picking out the color of your plates, the trays, the types of equipment to keep your food cold and hot. So it's identifying those satisfiers. What do you need to change in your operation to increase those satisfiers and to identify them?
And Marcia, let me mention, I remember our discussion the other day, you had mentioned that it doesn't, an operation doesn't necessarily have to invest in all pieces of serviceware at the same time. So on that previous picture, we noticed the ones on the right, that pretty much everything was matching. And a lot of times you'll still be able to buy things that match throughout a period of time, but if you don't, if an operation doesn't have the budget wherewithal to be able to jump into everything all at one time, they can make spot decisions or spot purchases throughout a year, and ultimately maybe by the end of the year or into the second year have a whole new range of serviceware in which they can bring forward to their customers and slowly implement it as they bring it in-house.
Great point. And the other point is also, if you're in a situation where you have to identify keeping your foods hotter or colder, you also can buy, you don't have to wait till you have a total renovation or infusion of money. You can also buy 2 or 3 pieces to start to change the way your food service is operated as well into that component, and also reach out to see what would make the best sense in that component. The thing you mentioned, which I would love you, is when you talked about 5 tips, could you summarize the 5 tips as an overall approach to that before we move forward?
Sure. So the 5 tips really is where we just left off with culinary mindfulness. But the first one was the components of a plate, or the approach to the plate, and how we're bringing those things together, how we're bringing the textures, colors, and shapes into the plate in order to make a more eye-appealing and ultimately enjoyable plate for the customers. Also, it gives us a better sense of pride and satisfaction in what we're putting forward, as well as in your employees. They have a better sense of accomplishment whenever they're properly executing something according to the specifications put forward. Number 2, craftsmanship is pretty much everything we do within our industry. And the better we know the product and the product utilization and proper execution for that product, the higher our level of craftsmanship is able to grow. Number 3 then was our flavor development. Essentially, the big takeaway there from me would be the layering of seasonings and seasoning food throughout its cooking process. And even if there are different raw ingredients being added to something, seasoning at the various times that the items are being added is very, very important. And then the other thing that I'm sure the majority of you likely know, we can't just always step to a salt shaker, so identifying different acids, whether it be citric acid or the acetic acid through the vinegars that you're able to put in there to help blossom flavor. Also, heat is another way, that not to make something spicy, but again, to help to stimulate the taste buds as salt does, so that they're stimulated to actually receive the flavor of the ingredients that you're putting forward. Then we have our service temperatures, very, very important. Hot food hot, cold food cold, as the slide said, and also maintaining those temperatures that Marcia said throughout the process. So making sure that you have temperature logs for your coolers, for your steam wells, that you're maintaining those temperatures throughout the process, and if they're not within the tolerance area of hot food hot or cold food cold, that you're reacting properly to either getting rid of the product or bringing it back up to temperature, or whatever the case may be for the given items. And then the culinary mindfulness, just knowing what's going on around you, being aware of your surroundings all the time, and if you hear something sizzling, there's a chance it's probably close to being done, or something of that sort. If you smell something, chances are it's probably overdone if you smell it at that point. So thinking about those things as you're conducting yourself throughout the kitchen on a daily basis, and then when we're able to do that, hopefully everybody's able to follow, because we want to create and portray that image that we want the others to be. So when we're putting a proper image forward, which is going to lead us directly right into this slide that we're on now, the teams that make a difference, leading by proper example and helping to instill all these lessons that we spoke about back into your line level staff and bringing them that knowledge that you're getting from the webinar is going to pay dividends. Anytime that you don't have to do it, that you know that you have somebody reliable that's going to be able to execute the way that it's supposed to be, that makes us more valuable as managers, also makes your employees more valuable as line staff, which ultimately enhances the whole entire operation as a whole.
And so when I look at the teams that make a difference, it's collaboration, it's looking at these points. You know, the term is fast tracking to nourishing your food service operations. And what we talk about nourishment is we're talking about giving it life. And giving it, re-imaging it from a brand perspective. And in order to do that, is you have to look at your operation, take each of the slides, each of the tips, and walk through your operation and see if you're doing it and if you're not. When we talk about spices and herbs, it's infusing things, it's the layering, it's incorporating new spices and herbs. Look at your population, you look at your audience. It's dedicating to customer service, it's collaborating with that component. So realizing it, what you're doing, where you're doing it, and using this approach. The other thing is when we say about mindfulness, it's also listening to the fragrance and notice what happens when you have the fragrances. One of the things that I've seen a lot of senior facilities do lately is use fragrances and seasonings and walk around with patients and do some experimenting and see what's working for that population. So you can incorporate those spices or herbs to stimulate more tastes. So again, those are tips, using seasonings, using food as that way. Some final thoughts. Again, team collaboration. Make sure that your chefs, as well as your dietitians, as well as your line people, as well as management, understand what you're doing. Go over the tips. Show them pictures. Show them these pictures. Which appeals to you? Looking at the food items on there, I can see the tip. I can actually, the one on the right pops out at me that I wish it was virtual eating. It's almost as if somebody took, you know, the items, combined them. They're not very high price, but it's a look. Again, remember, we eat with our eyes, dabbling a little bit, doing this kind of things, whether you have a room service application or you do congregate feeding or you do traditional tray line or it's retail, we still eat with our eyes. And if we can look at these components and the way it's plated and simply, you know, a lot of places have been using white or beige plates, but they're getting away from that. They're using a different color to stimulate it. So again, don't, you know, do things same old. Look at your operation and see how you can make a difference. The other thing is, what can you implement tomorrow that can make a difference in your operation the next day? You don't have to do everything at once. Take one tip and do it. And ultimately, if you look at these pictures, you're hoping that the imagery is healthcare food, delicious, beautiful, flavorful. I started a healthcare post food on Pinterest with lots of our industry's beautiful pictures of food. Please send them to me. I put your name of your hospital and I get them out there. So if you've got beautiful food that really changes the image of what people quote unquote say hospital food is, let's change it. Let's have a movement to change the way people think, because we are doing great jobs and these tips will just add to it.
The other thing I might add to that, Marcia, with your pictures, how about overhaul photos? That if you change the composition of a plate or you just change the cooking techniques that you put to a plate, it's still the same menu, but how have you changed it from last menu cycle to this or the new menu cycle as far as the eye appeal and the approach to the cooking methodologies and so forth? And, you know, we don't necessarily have to blow things up in order to make improvements, just as you said. So, you know, if you're doing overhauls or new compositions of plates and so forth, think about that. And that's another great one to put on a Pinterest board to show how same ingredients, different approach, different methodology is able to yield a superior product in eye appeal, nutritional value, as well as overall flavor appeal.
And thank you for your compliment, Kathy. Michael, you are doing an amazing job presenting this webinar. There is a reason why you positively care for the positive image of the chef and the dietary manager. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and skills with us. You are quite welcome, Kathy, Sue. I hope the audio is okay. Someone said something about the audio, but it seems like it's okay. So any other questions at this time?
Well, thank you very much, Kathy. I appreciate the input and compliment. And thank you, everybody, for attending our session and allowing me to impart some of my knowledge back onto you.
Okay, and we have a couple of more questions. I did want to thank Alluserv for sponsoring this today. Again, there are meal assembly, meal delivery equipment, trying to elevate it. Contact information is here, and again, we are here to serve you. The other thing is, we are running a little bit of a contest. Where do you think most consumers get their nutrition info? 2 ways to enter to win a cookbook for the holidays. Alluserv.com survey on the website, or tweet it out at Alluserv Twitter, and make sure you include hashtag Alluserv. And we're going to give away several cookbooks for the holidays. I think you're going to love them. Also, the certificate of participation for continuing education credits, video links, and on YouTube PowerPoint will be available probably.
We just lost you, Marcia. Are you still there? Can't hear you. I guess I'll jump in. If Marcia's able to come back, even she might come in through the microphone and speaker side as opposed to the phone. As you can see there, the different ways to get involved and participate, not only with Alluserv, but also for NAPM, and be able to be part of that. So jump in, take a chance, throw your name in the hat, and get involved on Twitter or through the NAPM site as well. So we'll give Marcia a minute or two to jump back in. But again, I'll say thank you all once again for coming out and participating in our webinar today. I hope it was valuable for you and you took something out of it. And if there's ever anything I can do for you, my information, you saw it on the website or on one of our slides here. But as Marcia said, this will be available on the Alluserv website. So feel free to reach out if there's ever anything you feel I can do for you in your operation. So we only have about 5 or 7 minutes left in the presentation, so I will wait around for a few minutes. I'm sorry I can't see any questions or anything that are coming in. So
thank you very much.
Sure. I can hear you now, Marcia.
You can hear me now. So
yes.
Again,
yes.
Thank you very much, Chef Mike. I wanted to thank everyone and Alluserv for sponsoring it. And if you need anything with meal assembly, meal delivery equipment, we're here to help you. Also wanted to let you know that we're running a contest. As you can see, where do you think most consumers get their nutrition information? 2 ways to enter to win a cookbook for the holidays. Alluserv.com survey, or tweet it out. Alluserv Twitter, make sure you include hashtags. We're going to give away several cookbooks. The certificate of participation video will be available online after December 29th. And this year, NAPM is offering for free registration, and if you're an operator and want to see the latest equipment, things that you can use, please reach out, click on the link. It's a great opportunity to make sure that you have one of those 5 tips taken care of. One last question. Someone asked me, how do we get started? Which tips would be the most priority? So, Chef Mike? Yes.
I say, I mean, it's really tough. I say anything that you can do, I would say, first of all, service temperatures is huge. So if you don't have a grasp of service temperatures, hot food hot, cold food cold, that's where it needs to start. Because the first thing we need to be doing is serving safe food. Then if we're serving safe food, meaning properly properly stored, properly presented to the customer, then we can start to work on seasoning. Because what I don't want you to do is focus all on seasoning and shapes and colors if you're not properly maintaining the food integrity from a safety context. So that would be paramount and definitely first, service temperatures and cataloging and logging that. But then moving into cooking methodologies, the layering of the seasonings, and proper execution of recipes, which then lends right back into the approaches to the plate with the colors, the textures, and the shapes on the plate. So, you know, they're all small items that really, a lot of them go hand in hand. The one that really stands out separately really are those service temperatures and the culinary mindfulness. Culinary mindfulness is really a tough one to teach. Someone wants to be there or not, and someone wants to be aware of their surroundings and be part of that culinary mindfulness. Foodies, you know, those types of folks are right in line with that. So I hope that helps you. Service temperatures, and then move into the craftsmanship types of things.
Thank you, and I think it does.
Sure.
And final thing I would say is that take a look at your operation tomorrow. Look at your breakfast, look at your lunch, look at a dinner plate, and see where you can take one of the things and make a change. Again, please send me your pictures. I started a Pinterest site called Hospital Food, and everyone's been sending me beautiful plates, and I put it out there with the name of your hospital or your name of your senior living facility or your name of your behavioral health, and it's kudos. It changes the image of elevating healthcare food service, and we need to do that. Quote, unquote, we don't want to be the hospital food. We want to be healthcare food service elevation. We want to have the pictures of people looking at what we just saw a few minutes ago. That. We want people to get excited and see that, and see all these plates and the imaging of breakfast items like that. So how great would that be? So send it to me at mdiamond@alluserv.com. Get me those images, go into Twitter for the cookbook, or go to the Survey on Alluserv website. If you have any other questions, please send them to me. I hope we've given you a little bit of how to nourish your operation and help it grow. Have a wonderful holiday season, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.